what made me want to work in fashion? When I was growing up, I played sports like all the regular, kids in the Midwest, boys in the Midwest, and would read Sports Illustrated and read all about all the athletes that I liked and kept reading that what they were spending their money on, cars and music and fashion and so I'd start picking up those magazines and I think I ended up becoming more interested in fashion than I did sports, and the better I dressed, the more attention I seemed to get from women, which was more attention than what I was getting on the football field. The blogging part was pretty easy. I had an idea for the Sartorialist, this idea of mixing photographs of guys that I knew were stylish with guys that I knew were fashionable, which are two different things. But I only really knew about websites at that time, and I knew that a website would take too much time. Too many other people would have to be involved. And when I happened to be going through the internet, I found a blog, just happened to click onto a blog. And I'm the kind of person that once I see something interesting, I just start hitting all the buttons, trying to figure out how they're doing it. And it was an interior design blog, actually. And I thought it was pretty cool. She had like 30 comments, she had some good visuals up. And once I saw that, I was able to look at it in an abstract enough way to be able to say, I could do this with my photographs. Once I figured out how she was doing it and how simple it was to do, I thought, that's the format I want to do. There weren't really any definitely I don't think any street style blogs. Maybe Face Hunter was up right about that time, but I didn't really know it in the beginning. But I saw the potential of using a blog as a visual format as opposed to it just text driven. At least I think most of the blogs at that time were very text driven. If they had a little bit of visual, it wasn't very important. Where for me, I thought this would be a great way to put photographs up and then put a little bit of text to create a conversation. But the simplicity is what made the blogging part. So the simplicity and the interaction with the audience were the two things that I think made it most attractive. The difference between what designers create are, they're creating a little world every season, head to toe, a full look, shoes, bags, dresses, the whole thing. Where street fashion is, what people are really wearing. There's an element of new, there's an element of previous seasons, there's your own history, your sweatshirt from high school and vintage pieces, and it's that kind of combination that I find so much more interesting than just the runway. But and I love fashion, I love going to the runway shows. It's not so much for me a shopping trip as it is, the appreciation of the craft of these, design geniuses, who come up with beautiful color combinations and beautiful proportion suggestions and these kind of ideas. So I look at the runway shows in a very different way. It's just kind of a romantic, artistic interpretation of how they would like to see fashion going forward. But for me, it's much more abstract. The runways shows are much more abstract than what ends up on people is much more real to me. Well, realistically, a fashion insider. I mean, I was in the business for 15 years before I started the blog. So, even though it was in a different part of the business, it was in sales and marketing. None of the people that I've met, since I've been doing the blog, did I know really beforehand. But I knew about the business, and that's how I really came up with the eye. I think part of what I do is the photography. I think that's half of it. I think I learned how to be able to shoot something in the romantic way that I see it. But then the other half of it is the editing, who I choose to shoot. And not so much because of the drama and over dramatic nature of the way they're dressed. Sometimes it's very, very subtle. My background in tailoring and pattern making and I think really helped me understand, the subtleties of a suit, and why a guy can look great looking very subtle in a suit. I think that's what really separates me is, I have a real understanding of actual clothes and how they work and how they should fit, and a reasonably good artistic version of photography that kind of captures that. And I think that was really kind of the best combination. The difference between fashion and style is fashion is the sometimes. It's the thing that's happening at that moment. Sometimes it might be pointy shoes, sometimes it might be heels, sometimes it might be flats. where style, I think, is something that's always there in your own personal wardrobe, whether it's a navy cardigan, reading glasses like this, but that's different for everybody. You know, everybody's version of style is totally different, and you know that's what I think keeps me going out on the street every day is going out and kind of seeing the variations and what things maybe I had never seen in quite that way. I find very curious in how people will be able to communicate their own persona through their clothing, their posture, the way they wear their hair. You know, I think all those elements end up becoming very interesting. Because I don't think I'm really particularly a people person. So for me, I think it's interesting to kind of be able to read people in that way. My favorite cities to shoot, Milan in Italy, obviously. The guys look great, the women look great. There's an old school romance. I mean, it feels like Italy in the 1950s. You know, the guys at the bars still wear beautiful white dinner jackets, and you know, there's a formality there. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's 90 degrees in the summer, and it's, you know, killer hot in Milan. The guys still put on their jackets to leave their office to go get lunch and bring it back to the office. You'd never see that in America. Guys barely can put on their, you know, their shirts to go to the office, or you know, keep their tie done. So I think there's a romance, you know, that they're willing to and enjoy that formality that they've created there in Milan, and you know, all across Italy, but especially in Milan. So I love that formality, but at the same time, after about a week, that I've had enough of that, and I'm ready to go to Paris, where it's more sexy and more dramatic, more challenge, you know, in terms of how they put things together. And then back to America, I really love being able to go to those three different places. And you know, in America, we're so much more sporty, so much more color, so much more different in the way that we talk about our style and way we exude our style. We have like in Milan, for example, they're very narrow. You know, everybody dresses in a few certain ways, and they have beautiful variations on those few kind of styles. But in America, there's a million different styles. You know, rocker and vintage and sporty and preppy, and so I like that variation. So one without the other is not nearly as interesting. I've been to Hong Kong, which I thought was very interesting, Beijing, but I want to go there more. In 2010, you know, that's one of my big challenges, is try and make it through Asia more. And I don't know, I'm curious to see what I find. You know, I think in Japan, I think, you know, there's a lot of style and a lot of subcultures, but it'll be interesting to see how much of the people wearing those clothes are really expressing something about who they are or who they want to be. And that'll be very interesting to see especially, you know, once you get there, once you get to a certain city like in Stockholm, you really get to know the people a little bit and what they're saying through their clothes. You know, it's more, to me, I think it's much more interesting than just the clothes they're wearing or the length of the skirt. You start to understand something about that culture. You know, in Rio, none of the girls have short hair. A lot of the interviews that I did in Rio, people would say, "What do you want to find in Rio?" And I'd say, "The one girl with short hair," because they just don't do it. And once you get to know them a little bit, you realize that all the girls are afraid to cut their hair short because they're afraid their men won't like them. So what you think of as a beautiful, natural style actually becomes a style out of fear, and it kind of changes your perception of it a little bit. So Milan, or for Japan, I'm very curious to see who is really doing something unique and who's just doing something because they've heard that's the way they do it in Florence or Milan. Well, by that question, it's what's that, an oxymoron? Trend and classic. I don't know if we can put those two together. Um, I don't know, because it's totally different for everybody. You know, for me, a navy cardigan, you know, always looks great. Converse tennis shoes, you know, just always work. But that's for me, and that's just it. You know, I don't, at least for me, I don't ever really look for trends. I'm looking for just what captures my attention at that time, and rarely do I ever look back and try and put together trends or say, you know, this kind of trend is important. For me, it's about the individual expression. And if you go back and look through the archives, you know, you might find certain things that become trends, but it's just not something that particularly interests me. blog took off pretty quickly, and I think it's because I had a particular point of view. You know, there's been other street style photographers. Bill Cunningham in the New York Times, you know, is like the godfather of modern street style photography, and other people historically. But I think what they had always done was they were always trying to find the most dramatic, the people that you wouldn't see every day, the people that were really different. Where I shot things that people would aspire to, you know, something that maybe they would see every day but didn't really know the difference between something done well and something not done as well. A suit that fits a guy really well as opposed to just another suit. Or a dress, you know, that fits a woman beautifully, or the way that she's put this combination of, you know, fur and an open-toe shoe, you know, two totally separate kind of ideas, and yet she's put them together in a way, and you go, wow, okay, that does look really great. So I think it took off not because I was shooting the incredibly different, but because I was shooting something people could relate to, a lot of different people could relate to. And I don't think there was one time, one particular thing that made me say, you know, this is really becoming popular. But for me it was, you know, these really heartfelt emails I would get from people that, you know, that meant something to them, that they could look at these pictures and say, you know, I look like that guy, but I don't look like him yet. You know, I want to look like him. I'm big like him, I'm a little chubby like him, but he looks great, and he's dressed better in his clothes than I am. So I know these guys were printing these photographs up and taking it to Nordstrom or Saks or Dillard's or wherever and saying, help me look like this, and would be able to achieve it because it was never in my blog about how expensive it is. You know, almost, if you look at most of the guys that are really well dressed, it's just the attention to detail. And anybody can do that. You know, it's just taking it to alterations and getting the right amount of cuff and all these little things that aren't about the expense, but just about the attention to detail.